Welcome back. Well, now we turn our attention to the third leg of the campaign, upon which they anchored while they campaigned to get into office, as the president also did say in his speech. Although don't forget that in that speech as well, he did talk about the role that they had also given to the EFCC to ensure that they have a free hand to go ahead and...
Indeed, the EFCC was given the freedom to pursue corrupt officials, and the judiciary was alerted on what Nigerians expect of them in the fight against corruption. That's one of the things that the president talked about in the course of his speech.
Okay, well, yes, as we turn our attention to that now, we're joined by Mr. Augustine Alega, a senior advocate of Nigeria and the president of the NBA on my immediate left. And then we also have joining us here Mr. Paul Ananaba, a senior advocate of Nigeria as well. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much for having us.
Well, the judiciary, very key role. The president spoke about it in his speech today, but many also remember him saying, well, judiciary happened to be his headache at the time. But let's look at how this has progressed. The fight against corruption, of course, is got to be anchored on the rule of law. If I could start with you, NBA President, do you think so far we don't seem to have done badly, that's as governments now?
As a government or as regards the judiciary?
As a government, fighting corruption, anchoring on the rule of law.
As a government fighting corruption, the government has done creditably well. As a government fighting corruption, at least government must have the will to fight corruption. Government must set out clearly its desire to fight corruption. And as I've always said, a part that government needs to add is, as you're fighting corruption of the past, you should put in place systems that ensure that there's no corruption going forward. On the side of the rule of law, there are challenges. Challenges in terms of obedience to court orders. Challenges in terms of delays in trials. And we think that the fight against corruption can be won within the ambit of the law. And I've always insisted on that. And we believe that no matter how attractive the proposition may be, anything that negates the rule of law is an invitation to anarchy. So we must ensure that as we fight corruption in accordance with law, within the rules that govern us, in accordance with our constitution. There must be a presumption of innocence. There must be a proper trial. And all those who are on trial who have orders in their favor, they should be respected by government. I think that we are moving closer. The other day, I think one of the governors, Bafarawa, was given leave to travel. And it shows that we are moving closer. There appears to be a new push by government to obey court orders. And we encourage government to move further along those lines. The world today is a village. Anybody who's facing corruption charges here who decides to run away, where will the person run to? With one phone call, you get extradited back to Nigeria. So I don't think we should entertain those fears. The most important thing and the critical part of it all is for us to be seen to be conducting trials in accordance with law that lead to where the courts so find convictions that are not overturned on appeal. But if we keep people in detention for such a long time without affording them a right of a fair hearing in court, we will move towards becoming a state that is not following the principle of rule of law, which is not good for us.
How do you think we're fared, Mr. Ananaba?
I agree that coming from the perspective of the government being willing to fight corruption, that is clearly seen in this government. At least you see that the psychological content of criminal act has been thoroughly wiped out. What I mean is, people no longer go to say, okay, let me go and take, or let me go and commit any criminal act, in particular in terms of corruption. The psychological content is now there. Oh, you don't just rush to take government funds and all that. To that extent, yes. But like my president has said, it's not only that. When you now get into the practicality of fighting corruption, you know that there are challenges on the ground. People are going to look at, is it going to be one-sided? Is it going to be done strictly in accordance with our constitution? Is it going to be strictly according to the ACJ and all that? Now, when you look at that, you also look at the courts themselves. How prepared are we for the courts to operate at the highest form?
Before you come to that part, do you think this is one-sided?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because we are talking about 365 days. We have to start somewhere. Even if there's dominance of some set of people, you have to start somewhere. It's like a bullet. It doesn't select people.
But it's aimed at people.
Yeah, it's aimed at people, and it gets to all the people who are within that line. What I mean is, if Mr. A is being prosecuted for collecting money from a set of government officials before, he is going to say, it's not only me that collected the money. Such defense can come. There are other people too. So that will not, you will get to, you may start from one person, but to certainly get to everybody that's involved in the crime.
Mr. Anadaba, let me come to Mr. Alege, because I recall he was in that hall when the president spoke to lawyers, asking them to join him in this fight. I recall you were there, and listening to him this morning, I'll give you a quote. He did say, we're also engaged in making recoveries of stolen assets, some of which are in different jurisdictions. The processes of recovery can be tedious and time-consuming, but today I can confirm that thus far a significant amount of assets have been recovered. You talked about having changed the way people pursue those who are maybe fugitive, wanted for corruption cases. Just a phone call away, you can just be brought back. If you look at the cases we have in courts, as a lawyer, what would you be saying to the Nigerian who thinks that this is almost like a never-ending scenario? You see a case. A while ago we had the politicians here, they did say, well, just one about the Nimasa case, which actually started during the President Jonathan administration, has come to a closure. But if you look at it, series of them till this moment, and people would have thought that by now would have seen some convictions or some closure to some matters. How is the judiciary helping in seeing that we have the speed with which, the expected speed in cases like this?
Well, I'll answer both your questions because you have thrown two bullets. On the first side, government needs to understand that those in whose jurisdiction your funds are kept, that money is aiding the economy of their systems. So they will put in place any obstacles possible to prevent you from taking that money. They will even tell you to show that how you're going to use the money. But government needs to be very frontal with them. Once you have identified funds that are due for repatriation to Nigeria, give timelines. Why would we be talking of funds that were recovered 8-10 years ago during the Obasanjo's regime? They are still being returned in trickles. If you find £1 million in an account, why are you returning £50,000? And you're having a ceremony to hand over a check of £50,000, £100,000. Why? Government needs to be frontal with them. When the Prime Minister of Britain said Nigerians are fantastically corrupt, I expected that the President had a foolproof answer for him. If you don't create a heaven for people to keep monies, then they will not steal the money. They keep stealing because you are creating a heaven for them. Where there's no receiver, then the thief becomes more careful, because if I steal the money, where am I going to keep it? But where you create a safe haven for them, you are indirectly encouraging corruption. This is something that should be very frontal. We should identify the funds and give ultimatum. If we don't have these funds by this time, we're going to break relations with these countries. We're going to take this step against these countries. Why would they keep money for such a long period? This is money that we need for our economy. This is money that we're taken out of here. They have so identified. If you speak to the EFCC, speak to the Attorney General's office, the trips they make, you pity them. It's as though they're going to beg. You have not helped us to recover the funds. Can we have our money back?
So it's been tedious.
Tedious. That's what the president is saying. The president is not confirming it. But I'm saying that the president needs to be very frontal.
Would you describe this as being frontal? One of the most recent actions taken, perhaps to foster the fight against corruption. The vice president recently inaugurated this National Prosecution Coordination Committee, where they say it's a 20-member committee headed by the AGF, and they're to prosecute high-profile criminal cases.
You know, any step that is taken to fight corruption we support.
How about this one?
But the fight against corruption has always been fought with several committees. The Attorney General has never fought alone. He's always worked in combination. Look at the members of the committee. Members from the Attorney General's office, people from EFCC, and maybe 2 private lawyers. This has always happened. But we support anything that can fight corruption, we support. If you want to have more coordination, we agree with you to have more coordination. But in all honesty, if you look at our constitution, the powers of prosecution are vested strictly with the Attorney General. Does the Attorney General need a committee to tell him how to do his work? I don't want to go into those issues now. But for now, if it's an effort that aids the fight against corruption, we'll support it. But strictly speaking, under the Constitution, the powers of the Attorney General are unfettered and cannot be controlled or constricted by any committee. Is the committee going to determine to the Attorney General who to prosecute or how to prosecute? The Attorney Generals in history have always worked with committees behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Always been behind the scenes. Yeah. They have set up several committees. If you talk of the prosecution of the Halliburton, they had a committee, they had lawyers, they had representatives from all the agencies, NSA, EFCC, private lawyers. It's always been like that. So personally, I think that putting in place too many committees
will be a distraction.
And at the end of the day, the Attorney General again is the head of the committee. So for me, I'm wondering, the Constitution says he's in charge of prosecution. Then you create a committee and put him at the head.